Hello guys, this is Arnold and I'm back with another video on how to make a very simple app. Last time we created the user interface and this time we are going to make it work. And with that it's time to get on with some coding. Now there is a nice tutorial on the internet about web SQL databases. It's creating a simple to-do list which is pretty similar to what we are doing here. And there is a small remark at the top that web SQL is deprecated. So that's pretty bad news, but not for us since the tools we use to create an app still support web SQL, so we can still use it, no problem there. Okay, so let's go back to the app, to our app.js and put in some more code. So first we are going to need a variable to contain the database. Let's just call it db and initialize it as null, so it's still empty. And then we need some functions to handle errors or query success. So let's create function on error. And it needs a transaction parameter and an error parameter. And then we will simply send an alert to the user that something went wrong. And just display the message in the error. Then we are going to create another function which is called onSuccess, and this function will run every time something in the database has gone correctly. So this time we have a transaction and a result. And sorry, I'm used to coding in C#, so I'm typing the braces on the next line, but in JavaScript you often just do it like this. So sorry for that. Let's just leave this empty and we can add stuff later there that we want to run every time we change something in our database. Okay, so the first function that's really going to do something is going to be the function that opens our database. Let's call it OpenDB, because why not? And again with the braces, sorry about that. And then we need to initialize the database variable, which was db is open database. Then we will have to give it a name. Let's call it shopping list. A version, which will be 1. And a display name, which we will never see, but whatever. Let's just make it shopping list with a space. And then we will need to provide a size in bytes, I guess. So let's just make it 1 megabyte by typing 1024 times 1024. All right, so this will create our database if it doesn't exist yet. Then there is the question of whether we have something already in it or not. We can easily fix this by running a query that will create a table in the database if there isn't one already in there. And we do it like this. With the DB, which is now a database, we have a transaction function, which we will provide with an anonymous function that will actually run the transaction like this function. And then the transaction will be a parameter to it. And then we can actually run a query inside the anonymous function with execute SQL, and our query will be create table if not exists. So this will create a table if it's not there yet, and the name of our table will be, I don't know, let's call it items. So it's going to have an ID which is of type integer, and it is of course the primary key. Ascending, so it will count from 1 and then go higher. And let's create a text field with our shopping list item, which will then be called item and be of type text. And that's it, I guess, for the query. Then we give empty brackets, as there are no query parameters in this case, and end with the semicolon. And then of course also end this with a semicolon. So now we have here a transaction with an anonymous function that runs an SQL query that will create a table if it doesn't exist And if it does exist, there is not going to be any problem. It will just not run this query. So what else do we need? Well, it would be nice to have a function that will retrieve everything in the table. So let's create that. And let's call it get items. So the same as last time to run a query, db.transaction with a function with a parameter tx. And then inside there we are going to do execute SQL, and our query will be select everything from items. And that's it. Again, empty brackets because there are no parameters. And then we can provide a function that will actually show the items. So let's not put it in here anonymously, but let's actually create a separate function and let's call it render items. And then also we can provide the method that will run, or a function that will run if we get an error, and we already have written it. So let's provide that on error, semicolon and semicolon there. So that's it. This will execute a query. And when the query has executed successfully, it will call this function. So that's next up on our list. Function render items. And the parameters that it will have are the transaction and the result set. So RS will actually contain the result of the query. So let's create a variable with the HTML output that we are going to generate. For output. And it'll be an empty string for now. Then of course we also need the element that we are going to write to, which is going to be our list items that we have here. And I believe the ID was shopping list, so we can just use get element by ID. So this will be var list is document.get element by ID shopping list. And now it's time to run a loop over this result set. So just a simple for loop. And then generate a row of HTML for every item in the result set. So let's first make a variable that contains all the data of this row we are currently trying to read. var row is rs.rows.item I, and then we can generate some HTML. Output plus is, so we can add the HTML at the end of what's already there, and we will create an ONS list item and then append the row.item, so this will be the text. And then let's add some more stuff on the next line. So we can create a small trash bin if we want. Let's put it on the right of the list item. And it will be a ONS-button that will contain an ONS-icon. And the icon itself will be called trash, and this is from the font awesome library, I believe. Wait, let's add the backslash there. And then close the button. And the div. So this will be just a simple button with a trash can at the right side of the list. And then we can close the list item. And that's it. We will generate one list item for each row in the database table. Then we can just put it in our list. And that's it. But now we have no data yet, so it would be nice to have a function that we can use to add data to the database. So let's write that and call it add item. So we had a text field, I'm not sure what it's called, let's go back to index. And it was called item, so that's easy enough. Oh wait, and this one is actually add item with a lowercase I, so let's change that into an uppercase. So make sure we call the same function. And then we will read the value from the text box, which was called item. So text box is document.getElement by ID. Oops. Item. And then the value we can get from there. And then we can again run a database query. tx execute SQL, and this will be insert into items, item, and the value will just be a parameter. Then we can provide the values inside brackets, which is just value, and we can hook it up to our onSuccess method that will be executed if this goes without any problem, and our onError function that will run if there is a problem. And that's it for inserting a new item. So it would also be nice to reset the value of the text box to an empty string. And then go back to the list immediately after the item is added with fn.load home HTML. So let's see if this actually works. Now we hooked up this function to our onSuccess method, so we could actually use onSuccess to reload our items into the list view. So let's put a call to get items in here. And then every time after we added an item, the data will be reloaded from the database. Okay, and then all we need to do is actually make sure that this is going to run. So for this we want to add an event listener, and the event listener will run a function that will load the data after Onsen has initialized the user interface. So how do we do this? Well, let's make some space here and type document.add event listener, and the event we want to listen to is init, and then we create an anonymous function with the event parameter. And then let's put in some code. Now, if the event.target.id, then we have to set this up, I guess. So let's assume that it's called home. Then we want to load the data. So first, open the database, and then get items. So let's see if this was actually called home. And it's not. We have to specify the page ID here. So let's say ID is home for the home page, and now we can hook up the event to only run if this page is being shown on the screen. So let's see what happens. Oops, we get an exception in our HTML of null. So this is on line 63, which is where we write the list HTML to our list on the screen. So I guess it will not be able to find this. So let's see what its name actually is. Oh, it doesn't have an ID yet. Whoops. So we'll call it shopping list like it says in the JavaScript code. And then when we run it, we get an empty list. Let's hit this button. Put in a test item. And there we have it. Let's add another one. So that was a lot of code, but actually it's all easy enough. Okay, so this doesn't have a working delete button. We need to add a function for this. Let's give it a parameter with the ID of the item we want to delete. And then run a query. And this time the query will be delete from items where ID is, and then a parameter, which will just be ID. And again, we will hook up our on success and on error functions. So now all we have to do is call this function from this button, which will be easy enough. Let's add the code inside the button tag. On click is delete item, and then we need to specify the ID, which we can get from row.id. Okay, so that's it. So we have added this on click to the button, and it will actually delete the item that we click on. Let's try it out. And it's gone. Delete me, and it's deleted. So I guess that's it. Our app is pretty much done. Next time, let's see if we can actually get this running on an Android device. For now, we're done. Thank you for watching, and see you again next time.